Welcome, everybody, to Boston 9/11 Truth. Um, Today is July 10th, Thursday, and we have a very special speaker tonight, Steve Andrews, who was actually working in the World Trade Center on 9/11, but wasn't in the World Trade Center at the time, but witnessed quite a bit and that he will share with us. So before I turn it over to Steve, I just want to go through a quick disclaimer. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not necessarily represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Boston 9/11 Truth. The material and information presented here is for general information and educational purposes only. The Boston 9/11 Truth does not necessarily imply endorsement or opposition to any specific group, product, or service. Boston 9/11 Truth aims to inspire and promote action by the truth advocates who support them and their efforts. So during Steve's presentation, Steve, do you prefer Steve or Stephen?
Steve is fine.
Steve is fine? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So during his presentation, I am insisting that all our participants abide by our guidelines, which you should have read when I sent out this invitation. During the entire meeting, all participants are to use polite decorum and are expected to be respectful of all other participants. No personal attacks are allowed. And of course, disagreement and debate are allowable as long as the content, not the person, is confronted. Voices are to be kept at a speaking level of sound, no shouting, and no one interrupts another person. So the first part of our meeting is the guest speaker's presentation. The presentation will be presented in full without interruption. Everyone else will be muted. We are to treat the speaker with respect, and especially if there is disagreement. So I will introduce Steve Andrews. He started working at the World Trade Center Twin Towers in the summer of 2001. He was an eyewitness to the unusual security procedure changes and the day of 9/11 itself. He has an interesting backstory too. Growing up, he had family and friend connections to the CIA. He was given a warning about, quote, terrorism at the WTC, end quote, in May of 2001 by people with connections to the CIA. Incredibly, some of the people who knew his friends and family rose in the ranks of the intelligence community, presumably because of their complicity in 9/11 and especially the cover-up. So take it away, Steve. Welcome. You need to mute yourself. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. I hope everyone can hear me. Please, I'm a big user of the chat, so if anyone has a question or something while I'm doing this, just let me know. I'm going to try to share my screen. I'm going to show you just two slides real quick. I was never good at these things, but I'm just going to tell you what I witnessed myself or what people told me. Maybe at the end, people can ask my opinions about things. I definitely have a lot of opinions about things, but for the most part, this is just a story of what actually happened that I witnessed myself. I'm trying to, 2002, I was frankly censored from the internet. And only in the last couple months have I've been able to like kind of relaunch a media presence. And I'll get into why that is. So if anyone wants to follow me, I'm just starting this stuff up again. So yeah, I'm going to give these disclaimers right up front. 9/11 is one of the most heavily documented events in history. I don't have any bombshell revelations. Mostly, my story corroborates a bunch of other people. I listed a couple of these, but also I forgot to mention the two guys from Fiduciary Trust, James Corbett and, or I'm sorry, Mark Corbett and Scott Forbes, who were witness to the power downs. Um, and the other thing is, I got to explain the CIA thing because it's hard to talk about this for a number of reasons. People think you're like bragging about some sort of insider information or something. It's not like that at all. I've never been like one of these people into like James Bond movies or Tom Clancy novels or anything like that. And I can assure you that uh, the CIA has only negative effects on my life. I wish I'd never met any of these people at all. So just, keep that in mind here. And also, I've never worked for them. Uh, I've never worked for them. I've never worked in any kind of like clearance type thing. I've tried to stay away from that as much as possible. Everything I'm going to give you here directly relates to the forewarning of 9/11, the day of 9/11 itself, or the cover up of 9/11, even though some of this stuff I didn't figure out for decades. So let me just give you a quick background. I grew up in DC. My dad was in Navy intelligence. He had like, meetings at the Pentagon twice a month. My brother in law was Air Force intelligence. And at some point, I believe I know the time period, he joined CIA. When I was 15, there was an incident that led me to being introduced to this family. And I became best friends, I would think, with the younger brother. Like I was 15, he was 17. His parents were divorced and he lived with his mom. But when I first met him, the first thing he does is take me to visit dad, who is got this big fancy Georgetown mansion, right? And he tells me that his father is one of the top 100 officers in the CIA, and there's 100 like program divisions in the CIA. His father is the director of one of those programs, making him the top 100. Then he shows me a James Bond movie. Now, I took this as like a kid bragging about his dad, right? And for him to tell me that his father worked in the CIA was about as interesting as if he had told me his dad worked at the post office, right? It just didn't mean anything to me. Um, in fact, I dated this girl in high school. Her mom worked on the space shuttle. That was like way cooler than like the CIA, which I didn't know what that was. So anyway, I could tell you a lot of interesting stories, but in any case, we graduate high school. I'm still 16. I'm gonna take a year off. He's got this apartment off campus, so I go live with him for that summer. We do exactly what you would expect two teenage boys with no adult supervision to do. And while we're there, he is involved in this project. Let's say, call it a project, right? And where did you get this, and what are you doing? Blah blah blah. And he tells me, oh, this person so and so, and that person so and so. They're doing this thing for my dad, right? This would become significant 20 years later, but I would have no idea. This would become very significant to the cover up of 9/11. So this kid knew the circle of people who were working for his father, right? Anyway, I go into college. He and I are friends on and off. A couple interesting things in the late 90s that relate to this, but I'll skip that. Maybe I'll get into it later. But in any case, so it's like, yeah, May or June of 2001. We are roommates again. We're both renting rooms from this guy. And I tell him, I just got this great new job. I'm going to be moving to New York City, and I'll be working right at the World Trade Center in the Twin Towers. Um, okay, so let me explain how this guy was, right? He was like pretty charismatic, kind of the life of the party type, kind of a ladies' man, frankly, very funny, very jovial. So when he was like upset about something or worried about something, it was real obvious. And his demeanor just completely changed. And he started like pacing around and he's saying, "Well, aren't you worried about terrorism?" Which was like way out of left field because he and I never talked about geopolitical events or anything like that, right? Um, so it was a very unusual thing. And again, it would only later, a decade later, would some of this stuff start to make sense to me. So yeah, so June of 2001. Now I have relatives that have lived in like kind of the suburbs, commuting distance in New York forever, and I'd stayed with them on and off over the years. So I just stayed with them temporarily, and I had to go do. I mean, I hadn't gotten the job. I still had to do the interviews, but it was kind of made clear to me that as long as I didn't screw up the interviews, they wanted to hire me, right? So I was pretty much assured that, you know. Um, so I so I moved there. I go through a couple of the interviews and then I get hired. My first day of work was in the second week of July. It very well could have been the 10th. I'd have to go look. But yeah, so I started working at this company at the World Trade Center. I was a computer guy. All I did was like computer programming stuff and like, fixing the printers. Uh Nothing super fancy. I did work on some pretty heavy duty financial software. But nothing like nothing like fancy, just a regular and also 9/11 was almost 25 years ago. I was like in my mid 20s. This was like my first kind of big job out of college. Um, so yeah, I start working there, and I want to tell a funny anecdote of what happened before all the security procedure changes happened. I don't believe in premonitions per se, but this is a really crazy story. So at some point, I go to the mall. It's a weekend, and I go to the mall. There's this big, huge underground mall under the towers, right under the whole complex. And I went to the Barnes and Noble, and I bought a book, James Bamford's book, Body of Secrets: A History of the National Security Administration, the NSA. Um, I'd known people who went to work for NSA. It was an interesting subject to me. Um, I read that book. It's very unusual in that there's an appendix in it that includes the Operation Northwoods documents, which I'm sure probably a lot of people here are very familiar with Operation Northwoods, right? This plan that was given to President Kennedy to like stage false flag hijackings in order to start a war with Cuba. It was odd to me that this guy Bamford included that in his book about NSA because that was before the NSA was even founded, from what I understand, and had nothing to do with the NSA at all. So odd. It was odd. So one day after I'd just been working there for a couple of weeks, I go up to the Windows on the World. I take a long lunch. Again, I'm 25 years old. Okay, I take a long lunch. I buy myself like a martini or something up at the Windows on the World, and I'm feeling like I'm the Wolf of Wall Street, right? And I swear I have this premonition when I'm looking out the windows, like the view was amazing, right? You could almost see like the curvature of the earth. It was just unbelievable. I'd never seen anything like it. And I've been to all the major cities and everyone's got their Skyview restaurant, right? I've been to all of them, but nothing could compare to this. It was amazing. And I thought to myself, oh my God, could you imagine if a plane flew into here? So I don't know. So what happened is when things started to get weird, it was about August. I had just gone through the first thing you have to do is you have to go through, get your security card, your badge that opens the doors and everything. You got to get a form filled out by your boss. Uh, you got to take it down to the security office. They have to verbally verify over the phone. You show them 2 forms of ID. They take your picture. They look you up in some kind of database, etc. First time it took maybe 20 minutes. And then in August, we get this memo that says everyone in the entire Trade Center complex has to get new IDs. And my boss is really teed off about this because, it's just a waste of everyone's time and everyone's already working and stuff. So since I'm the new guy that only worked there for a couple weeks, he tells me, you go right now, first person, go get your new ID and tell me how bad this is going to be. Right. Um, I go down there. I'm there all morning until lunch. There's so many people in line. I don't even believe they could have gotten everyone done before it happened. No way, I don't think. I have my reasons to think about why those security procedures changes were being done, but we'll see. About that time, or maybe it was before that, we noticed, and my coworkers and I all talked about this. We noticed a bunch of external security procedure changes from the city. There were always NYPD cars and trucks and vans parked everywhere, but all of a sudden it was a really noticeable increase. Close by, there was this like a city parking lot for like only emergency and police vehicles. It was half empty most of the time, but all of a sudden every spot was taken. And we all talked about it. I talked with one of my coworkers specifically. We're looking out the window, and I tell her, I was like, "Yeah, have you noticed all the new police presence?" And she says, "Yeah." And I said, I heard that there was some kind of terrorist threat or something." And she tells me, "Oh God, don't say that." She had worked there for another company in '93 when it got bombed the first time. And I don't know if she was in the building that got bombed or the other one, but she described all the, like, being evacuated and stuff like that. And God, her story, she was in the building when it happened. I'll get to her story later. But we all noticed it and talked about all this external security. Okay. Then there was the infamous power downs. Fiduciary Trust, Scott Forbes, Mark Corbett have both talked about this. We got a memo. Well, first I heard about it. Okay. First, I was told that they were upgrading the internet cabling, which didn't make any sense because, as far as I know, no one shared internet cabling. I don't know. But then that was a mistake. When I actually got the memo, they said it was like electricity upgrades. Now, my boss went ballistic over this. Okay, absolutely ballistic, because this would be a darkly humorous joke that my coworkers would tell in the year later. When they first moved into the World Trade Center, they were aware of the bombing, so they leased floors in both buildings. One is their backup. The joke being that, like, they might get one, but they won't get the other. Well, my boss goes ballistic about this power down. Power down one weekend, and then in the second tower the other weekend. And these guys had very sophisticated computer systems. It's not like rebooting your laptop. Um, you have to have a team of people to do it. It's a whole project. So my boss is running around cursing his head off about this power down thing. So is everybody else. Then, and I have to say thank you to Gene and Sandra for pointing this out. I didn't realize the significance of this, but about the Thursday before, which I believe is the same date they took the bomb sniffing dogs out. Okay, so here's how it was, right? Again, I'm a young guy. I would go to this dive bar a couple blocks away because I had this thing for the bartender, right? So I would like leave my bag and my briefcase and my laptop and stuff. I'd leave it at the office. I'd go hang out at this bar for an hour or two, and then I'd come back. I had 24-hour, 7-day a week access in both towers. Um, and I would come back. I did this again 2 or 3 times a week, right? And then all of a sudden, that Thursday, I think it was, I go in and it's like 8 o'clock. It's not even really super late or anything. And all of a sudden, my access is cut off. And just out of curiosity, I go to the other tower, the backup floor, and I can't get in there either. I didn't know what happened. Um, Figure, I don't know, maybe they fired me or something. They didn't tell me. But so I just go home and come in the next day, and honestly, I just sort of forgot about it. So yeah, that was like the summer of 2001. A bunch of these weird security procedure changes, external and internal, the weird ID security changes, the bomb sniffing dogs being removed, my access, the power downs, all of it. Like most of it has been on. A lot of people have talked about this before, um, but I just saw the whole thing. So I guess like the day of 9/11. Again, like I don't have any bombshell revelations. Everybody's seen all the videos, and everyone here, I'm sure, has seen all the testimonies. So it's crazy, right? I was on the subway on my way to work, and I met up with a coworker, and he and I were sitting next to each other on the train, and then we get to a transfer point, and I tell him, "I'll catch up with you. I'm gonna go smoke a cigarette." Right? So I'll catch up with you. He was like 2 trains ahead of me, I think. He got it real bad. Um, so I think we had just pulled in or were just about to pull into the trade center station when the car stops and the lights go out. And everyone's moaning, then the lights come back on, then they go out again, then they come back on, and the train starts going in reverse. And they back up like a couple of stations. And then the announcer says, "There's been an accident at the World Trade Center. Exit the train, exit the platform." So everyone gets out of the train. We're basically now we're on the sidewalk. Now we're far enough away that I was never in any physical danger from when the buildings blew up, even though I knew a lot of people who were. But we could see everything, right? So we're in this crowd of people, and you can see smoke coming out of the one building. And I think you could see the hole in it, but you could see, there was a fire. And of course, my first impression was there was a bomb. I just talked to there's a whole crowd of us. We're all trying to call people on our cell phones. None of the cell phones work. I talked to this guy next to me, and he says, I say, what happened? And he said there was an airplane that hit it. And I was like, that's crazy, right? So I don't know what it was. We're standing there in the crowd. No one can call anyone. And then people start murmuring in the crowd, and then everyone starts pointing, and we can see a plane. It's coming in fast, and it gets close enough you can hear it, and then boom, right in the side of the building, right? And everyone in the crowd now is like screaming and yelling. The cell phones still don't work. There was like one payphone. They used to have those back in the day. There was like one payphone on the corner, and like 20 people lined up, but I don't even think that was working. And nobody knows what to think, right? But I figured 2 planes. I thought, oh, this must be like a war, like America's under attack or something, right? So I don't know what it was, 45 minutes or whatever. And then we're just standing there in that crowd. Nobody can call anybody. And then the one building just blows up. And, somewhere between that and then the second one, which was like, what, half hour later, I think, 45 minutes later, we're just standing there in disbelief, in shock, frankly, as you watch this entire building blow up. And then the second one blows up. And then, look, I was a truther from that minute. Like, I mean, there was never any doubt in my mind. I didn't know the term, quote, controlled demolition. I didn't understand. I don't think I'd ever heard that term before. To me, the way I characterized it was there were bombs in the building, right? And honestly, for like months afterwards, I was kind of expecting the government to come out and say, oh yeah, Al Qaeda had infiltrated the security team and they put bombs. But that would have been like believable to me, right? And I was really surprised that they never did that. So, so I mean, I don't know. In a sense, that's kind of like the Trade Center story, but like the rest of the story, honestly, is almost more interesting. It's been a long time. It's almost 25 years. This is a historical event now. A lot of the people that I knew or knew me or my friends and my family, they're dead or retired. Uh, so I can like talk about a little bit more of this than I could before. So everybody's calling everybody else, obviously. I'm in panic, terrified about like, my coworkers and all. Eventually, you can get through to voicemail. So you could send people, I don't know what time this was, what, noon maybe? You could send people voicemails, but you couldn't make a connection on the cell phone. But you could get to people's voicemails. So I've got a bunch of voicemails from people, and I'm leaving a bunch for other people. And like the first person to call me, surprisingly, was that guy, the guy whose dad was in the CIA, who had given me that warning. He sounded really, truly panicked. He sounded truly concerned for me. Um, I don't know what he was doing up so early because he was on the West Coast at that point. Interestingly enough, I'm able to send him a voicemail back, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm okay. I'll let you know about everyone else, etc. I talked to some other people. You start to be. I got that coworker that I was on the subway with that had just gotten on the train before me. Like I was the most worried about him, but finally I got a voicemail from him, uh, saying that he was okay, but he was like covered in dust and everything else. He was like, I think he said he was like going up the stairs or something when the first plane hit, and uh was somewhere in the complex and the second plane hit, and then they started to evacuate. But uh yeah, he was just like a couple blocks away. They hid in like the walk-in freezer at some restaurant they just broke into, and it's crazy the stories he tells me. um that woman, that my coworker, she was at her desk when the first plane hit, and there was an announcement over the intercom that said, "Oh, there's been an accident. Uh, stay at your desks." Right, and she and all the rest of the coworkers said, "Hell no! Whatever's going on, we're getting out of here." She told me immediately thereafter that the lobby of the building, I can't. I have to look up which building it was, but this is on the Nalday Brothers film, which I'm sure people are familiar with, called World Trade Center. That was supposed to be kind of that was like the big propaganda thing they were going to push, but they really buried it quickly because raised more questions than it answered. In any case, she said the lobby had been bombed out, that windows were broken, that's what she had said. She thought that a bomb had gone off in the lobby. Um, uh, what's interesting is then I get a call back, another voicemail from that guy, and he tells me that he's given my phone number to a man that we knew, that we both knew, um, who was a journalist, a prize-winning journalist at a major U.S. newspaper, and he's gonna like interview me. He wants to do an interview or something. Um, then that guy calls me and leaves a message. Uh, my first instinct was to I wanted to be like, oh yeah, by the way, there are power downs. Oh yeah, by the way, the security procedure changes. They must have had bombs in the building. And then, honestly, I thought to myself, "Mm, I might not be allowed to. Yeah, I wasn't the type to try to become a celebrity anyway. So I was very hesitant, and I just never called the guy and just dropped it. We were we were at home. Basically, just everyone was just telecommuting, calling for the next 2 weeks until they found temporary offices. And then we started working. Yeah, I think I mentioned this on a previous call, but and someone had mentioned that James Corbett's documentary about the financial stuff about 9/11 mentioned this, but I heard this from coworkers. There were people at that company. A lot of people at that company knew people who worked at Cantor Fitzgerald. There were a lot of people who had worked at Cantor Fitzgerald that went to work at this company. They had like an existing type of business relationship. Um, there was a meeting this is just what I heard, right? Again, this is not I'm not quote unquote doing my own research. I'm just telling you what I was told. I was told by my coworkers that there was a last minute emergency meeting set up, and a number of people from a number of different financial companies, broadly, like everything, banks, insurance, brokers, uh, reinsurance, everything, right? I don't know what obviously this is way, way, way above my pay grade. I just heard about it from people. And the person who apparently called that meeting apparently didn't show up. Uh, there were a number of people, we all obviously like Larry Silverstein, the guy from Cantor Fitzgerald, Lutnick, I think his name was. He was the CEO. He didn't show up, but his brother died. So, I can't imagine him, you know, yeah, I mean, I don't know. There were definitely people. Well, I don't know this. I'm just saying is I definitely believe that there was a lot of foreknowledge and a lot of people were warned, but I don't know that personally for a fact. That's just like, research or whatever. Um, I don't know. I guess really that's the story of 9/11. But honestly, like the next couple, okay, I lived in Manhattan for 10 years after that. I talked to a lot of eyewitnesses. Everybody had a story. Um, and there are a couple things I discovered over the years, again, like personal discoveries that have absolutely to do with the cover up. And you know what? Frankly, if you guys have been in the 9/11 truth movement for a long time, I might actually be able to provide you a little bit of insight about some of the pushback you have likely received over the years. But let me tell you one more thing that happened right afterwards. So that December for Christmas, I go down to DC to visit my family, and an old school buddy of mine invites me to a party. It's all a bunch of military guys at this party, all young couples in their 20s. Half the women were there by themselves because their husbands had already deployed, but like 20 something, early 30s, right? And my friend tells me, "Oh, you got to meet this guy. He was a witness to the Pentagon. You got to share your stories." So I'm just going to tell you what this guy told me at the time. Okay. He was military family. He was at Arlington National Cemetery right next to the Pentagon. Arlington National Cemetery with his brand new fancy digital camera that back in those days were like $1,000 or $2,000 or something. He was visiting the grave of, I don't remember if his father or his grandfather, and making like official memorial photos for, family stuff. Um, and he notices a plane. He did not describe anything about the plane to me. He just said a plane. He notices a plane coming, and he knows enough that it's in restricted airspace. So he starts snapping pictures of it. He also told me that following the plane was a C-130 cargo plane, um, that was just tailing this other plane. Then he says, he didn't, I don't believe he used the term corkscrew turn. That's used often, but he did mention some kind of maneuver that the plane did. And then he said the plane hit the Pentagon, and then this C-130 cargo plane veered off and kept going. 10 years later, I would, just a couple years later, I would find out that 10 years afterwards, the pilot of that C-130 did an interview. It's on YouTube still. And I think Gene posted it in one of the chats a couple weeks ago. He had been like contacted by the FAA or the military or something and said, we don't have any planes in this area. This plane, something's wrong. We don't know if it's damaged or what's going on with it. It's not following procedures. Can you go just make visual contact with it? So that's what he did. So it's just funny that years later, that weird little detail, which never made sense to me, and when I told people about it, they were like, "No, no, no, you must be mistaken." But apparently, no, it was a real thing. They had, why NORAD wasn't following them. Hey, well, that's up for debate, but they got some random C-130 guy to follow this plane. Then this guy told me that the FBI shows up and confiscates his camera. He told me that he swapped his SIM cards, figuring that they might do that, and he still had all these pictures. The internet was kind of new at the time. I told him, "Oh man, you gotta you got to put this online or something. People need to see this." And he was just like, "No, I wouldn't want to do that. It might jeopardize national security." I mean, I guess in a sense he was like a true believer, I guess. Um I but before I get back into the CIA story and how the stuff got covered up, I want to tell you one interesting anecdote about living in Manhattan in that time period. Okay, so my my wife was like a big time Democrat, right? She's the only person I've ever known in my life that actually really liked Hillary Clinton for whatever reason. Um, so we would go to these like Democratic Party. Okay, let me explain. Like I was never really political. In that election, I voted for Ralph Nader for trade policy, which is like the nerdiest, wonkiest thing you could do, right? I did not like Al Gore because he was the big NAFTA free trade guy, and Bush, I didn't know anything about Bush. I didn't hate him. I was not like anti-Bush. He just seemed like a typical, conservative Republican to me. But I mean, after 9/11, oh yeah, I freaking hated his guts. I was like a huge anti-Bush guy back in those days. I was posting all over the internet. Oh, they must have known. We called it lie hop versus my hop back in those days. I've been banned from so many early internet forums back in the 2000s because of this. In any case, I got to tell you this. got to tell you this one story because it really, really says something about the social environment at the time. She and I attend a fundraiser for the Democratic National Committee. It's at this big fancy hotel in Manhattan. Um, there's two fundraisers basically. Okay, there's the main one that's the big banquet hall. That's like $10,000 a plate. Obviously, now we're not getting into that one, right? Hillary Clinton was there. John Kerry was there. Jonathan Edwards was there. I believe Obama was almost certainly there, but no one knew who he was. He was just about to get introduced later, a year later. Um, Instead, we were across the hall in a smaller room for the Young Democrats meeting. And you have to understand when they say Young Democrats or Young Republicans, they mean under 40, right? They're not that young. But yeah, it's like a bunch of couples in their 20s and 30s. It's $100 a ticket, open bar, hors d'oeuvres and stuff. Uh, and the guest speaker was Wes Clark. I actually wound up meeting Wes Clark, not meeting, like shaking his hand, right? Uh, at least 3 or 4 times, and I met his son once or twice, who was a coordinator for his campaign. Um, yeah, so and I kind of was a fan of Wes Clark because he seemed like he was the most credible on military stuff to defeat Bush. Frankly, that's all I was interested in, right? Um, okay, okay, so my wife had just gone onto the internet, charged $200 on her credit card, and given them our names. We show up at the hotel. They've got the reception table. She says, "Oh, okay, this is me and this is him." And they look up our names on the list and they check them off and they let us in. This is at a time period, okay, when the subways have got these signs saying, like, if you see something, say something, any unattended package, you've got to report to the police. The television is saying, everybody is saying, oh, it's inevitable. We're going to get hit again. It's inevitable. It's definitely going to happen. Everyone's on their guard. Everyone's paranoid. And okay, so my wife is hitting the line pretty hard, right? Okay. And she starts talking about this and she's mad. She's like, "They didn't check us. They didn't check our IDs. They didn't check my purse. I could have a gun in here. Well, what if somebody had a suicide vest? They could walk right across the hall into that banquet hall and kill like 2 or 3 top level Democratic politicians." And I mean, she was right. Like I totally agreed with her. So the funniest thing happens. She sees Terry McAuliffe across the room. Terry McAuliffe at the time was the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, and he was kind of known as Clinton's corporate bagman. He would later on become the governor of Virginia. Um, so she goes up and basically accosts this guy, and she's like, oh my God, there's not enough security at this event. I could have a gun in my purse." And I'm like almost wetting myself thinking, oh God, like the Secret Service is going to come out now. But Terry McAuliffe goes into politician mode and he's like, oh yeah, no, I'm really sorry about that. I'll definitely talk to someone about security. I just bring up that anecdote because it just shows that they weren't they weren't worried. The top levels of one of the major political parties are holding the shindig in Manhattan, letting crazy women like my ex-wife in, with no vetting, no security. They weren't worried about Al Qaeda. They really just weren't. Apparently not, you know? And I saw multiple things like this. Elite people, rich people in Manhattan never had a worry about any of this stuff. That was strictly for like the public. Now, I want to get to the part about the cover up, okay? Because I think this is unintuitive to a lot of people. It was very unintuitive to me. But I got to say, this is a very dark and ugly subject. 9/11 killed 3,000 people almost immediately. The wars are still ongoing. Millions of people have died. Horrific atrocities were done and are ongoing. Now, I'm going to try to be as euphemistic as possible, but some of this stuff is important to understand the story, okay? So, I don't really talk to this guy, the CIA guy, the guy whose dad was in the CIA. I don't really talk to him until about 2003, in which my wife and I attend his wedding. This time I'm the one hitting the champagne really hard, and I spend the whole time in the corner talking to his older brother about 9/11, saying, "Oh my God, the government must have known. Oh my God, they must have had bombs in the building. I think this, I think that, etc., etc." And I think this is when I first got on the naughty list. I don't remember saying this, but I'm thinking to myself, I almost certainly said to him, "Hey, man, wasn't your dad in the CIA? What does he think about this?" I'm almost certain I did. What I would come to find out, okay, it wasn't just his dad that was in the CIA. There were probably future executive deputy or even directors of Central Intelligence at that wedding. And I would come to find out that those people were far more connected and far more broadly connected than I ever realized. And
Wow.
holy crap, would I find out a couple years later when I really stepped in it. I have one more anecdote about Manhattan. In about 2006, my wife and I attended like a Ron Paul meetup. Um, and I get in, I start talk, I spend the whole time talking to this FDNY guy, firefighter. Okay. He was young. I think he was on the force when 9/11 happened, but he wasn't like at ground zero or anything, but he knew a lot of people that were. He was related to people who died, etc. He just told me two interesting stories, and one of which I would come to understand the significance of later when we get to the Susan Lindauer part. Um, well, one thing this guy told me, I'm sure everyone knows the story about Giuliani and the FDNY radios. He told me there was a conspiracy in FDNY back in those days to literally assassinate Giuliani in revenge for whatever the controversy was with the radios. I don't know the details. I know a little bit about it. Some of you guys probably know more about it than me. But like this guy wasn't kidding. It may have been drunk talk, sure, but like these people were real mad at Giuliani. He also told me something real interesting. It's an ugly subject, but it's important. Okay. He told me there was a lot of high-ranking guys in FDNY that all of a sudden got 20-year-old Russian girlfriends that year. And when we get to Susan Lindauer and Richard Fuse, oh my God, like you wouldn't believe it. In any case, so I don't see this guy. Okay, I basically don't see this guy from 9/11 until 2007, with the exception of seeing him at that wedding. Okay. In about 2007, and this date would become significant, but I did very significant to cover up of 9/11, but I wouldn't understand this until years later. In 2007, he sends me an email or calls or something and says, "Hey, me and my new girlfriend, we're in town for one night. We're flying out in the morning out of JFK. Uh, let's go have drinks." So my wife and I and her and our girlfriend and he and his girlfriend go out, and the ladies are all chatting at the table, and he and I are at the bar drinking a beer. They only stay for maybe a half hour, and then as he's leaving, the last thing he says to me is, "Listen, you're not allowed to talk about me. You better never talk about me. Don't forget, I know stuff about you." And then he leaves. Never hear from him again. I had no idea what the hell that was all about, but I would come to find out a couple years later the significance of that date. In 2007, a very significant CIA officer went on television and quote unquote blew the whistle about the so-called enhanced interrogation program. The enhanced interrogation program was used to get false confessions for 9/11. And it's even uglier than that. So couple more years go by. This is important to this. My wife and I split up. At some point in this time period, I open a YouTube channel and I buy a video camera, and I'm gonna make myself into one of these like Luke Radowski, We Are Change types, right? But I quickly come to realize that that is like not my personality, right? Um, so you know, at some point I just decided to move. I was kind of like, I didn't like living in New York City anymore. I was saying I didn't want to live in New York City anymore. I kind of hated my job. I quit. I moved. I moved and I stayed with my elderly retired parents for a summer, right? And I'm helping my dad clean out the garage. I start a blog. Okay, I write about all sorts of stuff. I never took it seriously. It had like a funny handle. I wrote like comedy and parody, like The Onion type stuff, right? Some serious stuff. I wrote about 9/11 seriously. Um, but I'm helping my dad clean out the garage, and he's going through his old files. He gives me a newspaper clipping about that incident where I had first met those people, right? And I hadn't thought about this in 20 years, right? And then I swear to God, just complete coincidence. There's an article in the Washington Post that names a bunch of that guy's friends, or the people that he told me about that were involved in that project working for his dad, so and so and so and so. These people are rising through the ranks in the intelligence community. Some of them are on, if you look up the right Wikipedia pages, they're technically speaking public figures, even though no one ever talks about them or knows anything about them. They mention that project, but no one knows it was CIA, and nobody knows that these people were working for the CIA way back then. Like, they didn't officially appear as having worked for CIA until a decade later. But I was just told randomly when I was 16 years old that these people were working for my friend's dad. Well, I made possibly one of the dumbest mistakes I've ever made in my life under the under the under the misunderstanding that this was a free country and I had free speech. I wrote about this on the blog, and I said, I bet you I know what so and so and so and so were doing back right out of college. I bet you they were doing psychological experiments similar to quote MK Ultra unquote. Now I realize this is an esoteric topic for people, but nothing I'm saying is not on the public record. It's all on Wikipedia. If you go look, I'm sure people remember the argument over waterboarding. From what I remember, this was a big thing during the War on Terror, right? Is waterboarding effective? Is it legal? Is it immoral? That guy, journalist Christopher Hitchens, got waterboarded to see if it was torture or not. In 2007, John Kiriakou had gone. Okay, John Kiriakou was the guy who caught the first high-value Al-Qaeda target. John Kiriakou is all over social media, all over YouTube. He gives interviews all the time. I've got one pinned to my X. If you ever, he's worth watching, but don't trust him because I've caught him in many lies. But in 2002, he caught Abu Zabata, who they believed was the number 3 in Al Qaeda, but he actually wound up just being a logistics person. But he is the one who led them to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who they believed to be the mastermind of at least the hijacking part of 9/11, right? Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. They later started torturing all those people. John Kiriakou was offered to be trained in the quote unquote enhanced interrogation program. He turned it down. Other people turn it down, saying it's illegal. Someone's going to get in trouble for this. I don't want to go to jail. Um, he gets contacted, and he believes that they're about to pin the torture of Abu Zabata on him. In 2007, this is the time when the CIA is hacking into the Senate Intelligence Committee's computer system. There's a whole Hollywood movie about this, came out a couple years ago, called The Report. It's actually pretty interesting. If you're interested in the subject, you should watch that movie. Um, so John Kiriaki goes on TV, and what he says is, um, uh, the CIA tortures its prisoners. It's an official policy. It was signed off by the president. I Before 9/11, right? I didn't know anything. The only thing that I knew about the CIA before 9/11 was the MK Ultra thing, because I had actually done a lot of reading into that. Did a thing about it in high school. Did a project on it in college. I was well read in that subject, but that was really the only thing. After 9/11, I start really researching into CIA, and well, 9/11, I start researching 9/11. It all leads to the CIA. I start researching the CIA. It all leads to my family and friends, which was very awkward, to put it lightly. Okay. As soon as I write this stuff on my blog, this is right before the 10th anniversary, right? I had that YouTube channel. I was going to go to New York City and like do a bunch of interviews and film a bunch of people and write about it on the blog. My wife, my ex, calls me and she says, this guy approached me at this networking event asking if I knew any computer programmers who might want a job. My wife worked in the fashion industry. She doesn't know anything about computers. Why in the world would they go to her? I asked her that, and she said, yeah, no, it was weird. He seemed way more interested in talking about your career than mine. I call this guy up. I'm a little suspicious. It seems kind of odd. I go up to meet him. He's in this cutout office like 10 minutes away from my relative's house that I just moved from. And it's like this job was created just for me. And I figured it out. I was like, wait a minute, like this has to do with I always thought that the thing I was writing about that was getting me in trouble was my 9/11 eyewitness testimony and what I witnessed in the towers. What I would come to find out, it was the fact that I knew of those people and I knew of their relationship to the CIA enhanced interrogation program. And they forgot how much I knew because I had so many close connections with these people over the years. Okay. And so one time when I don't actually start working for this guy, but it's real convenient. And I was supposed to be telecommuting, and it's like getting closer to the anniversary. And he keeps saying like, no, 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 I need you in the office every day. And one time we go out to lunch and he asks me, like, do you think the government has a machine that can control the weather and start hurricanes? And I'm like, no, I never heard anything like that. And I'm thinking to myself, why in the world would he be asking me such odd questions? He's trying to like figure out what I might say about 9/11. I go back home and I just tell the guy, no way, I'm not doing this job. Thank you anyway. That guy would show up 10 years later, and now I understand what was happening. Later on, I get a job, and this guy and I, a coworker and I, we would go watch the game after work, and he keeps on telling me about this woman. I think he's got a crush on her, but I don't think it works the other way around. But he tells me all these unusual personal details, an unusual sport that she plays, and that she's just graduated and she's about to take her first overseas trip for the agency. I got a lot more I could say on that, but let me just kind of wrap it up. In 2000, I blogged about this stuff for 10 years until I got too close. And in 2022, they moved to shut me down. They literally physically threatened me, which is why I'm not saying any names because I could name names. You can figure it out if you look it up on Wikipedia. Um, but oh my God, like they literally threatened to murder me. Then they freaking sent a psychologist to contact me. I just had dinner with him last year. I met him for coffee. He flew to New York. I met him for coffee. I took him out to a really lovely, wonderful dinner with his beautiful wife and his lovely sister. I promise I wouldn't name any names and I wouldn't make any specific details. You can ask me, I'll tell you whatever I want, but that's the thing. I can tell you what's interesting is that a little bit of analysis. Under the Bush administration, ironically, there was a real rift between the neocons in the White House and the CIA. George Tenet had actually been nominated by Clinton and was a holdover. Same with Richard Clark, the counterterrorism czar. Um, uh, if you remember those awful Abu Ghraib torture scandal pictures, um, according to Cy Hirsch, that was a separate DoD program because they weren't getting what they wanted from CIA, so they came up with something called Copper Green, run by that guy Douglas Feith, who Tommy Franks called the stupidest effing guy in the world. um, uh, those okay, yeah. Okay, so back in the days of MK Ultra in the 50s and 60s, they called it quote mind control unquote or quote brainwashing unquote. Very unscientific terms, very conspiracy sounding. I don't like to use that terminology. In the post 9/11 era, they called it learned helplessness. They hired two psychologists to do it. I don't know. I think that's really my story. Thank God that the government turned over because everybody involved, as far as I can tell, now is either dead or retired. I still can't name any names, but I think they're all out of government and it doesn't matter anymore. So I don't know. That's my story. I hope you enjoyed listening. Please like, follow, and subscribe.
Thank you. You also had share screen that you wanted to do, right?
No, I just wanted to show the links for everything. That's all. I didn't have like a presentation or anything, but I just wanted to say if anybody please I'm trying to rebuild my social media presence after literally having to like oh my god, I mean they even censored me from Google Cache and the Internet Archive. It was amazing.
Wow. Yeah. Well, has his hand raised for a question. Go ahead, Gene.
Yes. Thanks, Steve. Pretty good. I wanted to be able to share my whole screen. I guess I can't. Uh,
You will-
um, let's try it this way. I can only do one at a time. You had said you were on. I was trying to get a location of where you were standing when you said you saw the towers get hit. When you
No,
saw
no,
the
no, no. I can't. I can't. It doesn't matter. Everyone's seen the videos. Like my story of that day. Like everyone's seen it, right? We were, we were far enough away that we were never in danger when it hit, but we were close enough we could see everything. And everyone's seen the videos. I saw the second plane. We saw the one building blow up, the other building blow up. Really, like I said, there's no. I don't have any like smoking gun the day of. Like
Yeah,
I
I
saw
just
the
wanted to
same
get.
thing everyone else saw.
Could you just tell us where you were standing, roughly?
Nah, it doesn't matter.
Hmm. Of course it does, but okay. Thank you.
Um, any other questions?
Honestly, I really think that the story about like the CIA stuff is really the unique part of my story.
Right.
I did not, again, it took me decades to realize this, but they used they used the enhanced interrogation program. Like Bush specifically ordered Cofer Black to torture people to get false confessions to blame 9/11 on Iraq. He actually went on TV and said, "We have found connections between Al Qaeda and Iraq," and trying to pass this lie that Saddam Hussein was had been um, training Al Qaeda, which anyone who knows anything about this would know it's not true. And also Susan Lindauer, when she first came out with her testimony, I, of course, looked up Richard Fuse, and I could not believe what I learned about this guy. He's almost like a Jeffrey Epstein type character. He ran off with $30 million in hush money, uh, basically to keep quiet about 9/11. It's unbelievable. Like, I almost think that that's more like the stuff that happened in the tower. Like I said, that's all been corroborated by a bunch of other people, and what it means. Hey, I got my opinion. I think Ace Elevator, Susan Lindauer says they had vans showing up in the middle of the night, the power downs. I mean, I think it's obvious to me, but I'm not telling anybody anything new, I don't think.
Jerry has a question. Go ahead, Jerry.
Hello, I hope you could hear me there. Fascinating account, Stephen, and glad you came out of it and your friend came out of it. I remember it was a few weeks ago you mentioned that they were working on the elevators, um, in the run up. Can you remember what elevator it was? And like the number of elevator. You know, you've got like the ones I'm interested in elevator 6 and 7 and elevator 50. But elevator 50, I don't think you'll get. But these are the ones that went right up toward the tower. Can you remember at all any specific elevator that they were working on at any level?
Well, I'm pretty sure the comment I made was this. They were always working on one elevator or another. There was always some elevator that was out of service or under repair. There's a lot of elevators. If I recall correctly, I mean, I mean, everyone knows how huge the towers were. If I recall correctly, the elevators are broken up into three. You would take an elevator up to 1/3 of the distance, then you transfer, and then you go up to the second third, and then the third. I don't know if there were I don't know if there were any elevators that actually went all the way from the top to all the way from the bottom. I'm not sure. But my point was just that there were always elevators being worked on. There were always maintenance crews in and out of the building constantly. There's constant, construction work on any building that
Yeah.
size. So the idea that it would be unusual for an elevator to be out of service is no. I mean, it's totally normal.
Okay. Fair point. There were actually three elevators that did go up to the impact point of the North Tower, that went from basement level, B2 level, and B5 level up to there. There were only three. So my interest was really about the lobby damage.
So
And
there was three elevators that went all the way from the top to all the way from the bottom.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, one of them went up to 107. The other went right to the top. But that was my interest. My other question, just really quickly, if you could indulge me, when the second plane impacted, did the ground move? Did you feel the
No,
ground move?
no,
Okay.
no.
Oh,
Yeah, it was just like you saw in the video. We're just standing there in this crowd, and then the crowd starts to murmur, and then people start pointing. You can see this plane in the distance, and it starts to get closer and closer. And then all of a sudden, people start to think, "Wait, this is not good." It got close enough you could hear it too, and then yeah, it just flew right into the building and blew up, just like all the videos show. I don't really got anything different
fascinating.
on that.
Right, fascinating account, though, Stephen. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Barbara has a question. Go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah, hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for what you've shared with us.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I was in a vet appointment, an emergency vet appointment, and I missed the first half hour, so I'll have to see the video. And we can talk after that. But my first question in there too, is have you told us everything you wanted to about the Susan Lindauer fuse link? I don't think you have.
This is a really ugly topic.
Well, but it's
Uh,
important.
okay. I'm going to post a link. I'm going to post a link in the chat to an article from New York Magazine from 1998 that mentions Richard Fuse. This is a very ugly subject, but let me just real quickly say something, okay? I lived in Manhattan for basically a decade, right? I moved there in the summer of 2001. I left right before the 10th anniversary. My wife was a big social butterfly. We were always going to parties and, we saw some things, okay? Let me tell you just real quick, okay? We went to this party once, I don't know, 2004 or 5, something like that. Half of this party was couples in their 20s and 30s like us. The other half of the party was a bunch of men in their 40s and 50s and a bunch of young Russian women in their 20s who were dressed in the uniform, so to speak. And my wife and I both noticed it and talked about it. And we were like, we're the cover here. We were just invited. All the couples were just invited to make this thing look respectable. This is obviously some kind of like trafficking thing or something. Well, if you read that article about Richard Fuse, he admits it. He admits it. The Central Intelligence Agency was running a bunch of like high-level Russian, I'm not sure, honey traps, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. It's openly in that article. That's from 1998. It mentions the CIA. It mentions the Russian connections. It mentions Richard Fuse. And it matches up with what that fire department guy told me, that all of a sudden, a bunch of these high-ranking fire department guys all of a sudden got these Russian girlfriends. That's a compromise thing. I've read a lot about the CIA since I've discovered this stuff, and this is par for the course.
Well, can you clarify before I ask my other question? Can you just clarify first what you mean by the Russian women were in uniforms? What is the uniform? And doesn't it make sense that this was a Russian honey trap, not a CIA honey trap?
I'm sorry. When I said uniform, I was being euphemistic. They were
Oh.
dressed in a way that,
A come-on way.
yes, right. And, look, women like to dress sexy in Manhattan, but this is like a little more than that, right?
Over the top. Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
But why would you, were you actually told by somebody that this was a CIA honey trap operation using Russian women, or isn't it more likely it was the Russians' own?
I obviously have no firsthand knowledge of this whatsoever. I'm just going by that article From Russia with Sex by
Okay.
Michael Gross for New York Magazine from 1998.
Yeah.
And it talks, Richard Fuse openly talks about flying a 17-year-old girl out of Moscow against the wishes of the Russian government. He said he was literally they were in hot pursuit of him, but the plane took off before they could catch him. Brought this girl to New York City. She met with like Nancy Reagan. And then he talks about like, they call them models, but like we all know what this is, right? It's not, and I'm sure the Russians do that stuff. Absolutely. There's that woman, Marina B something, but Lima.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the Russiagate thing. Yeah.
Certainly the Russians are known to do this. Absolutely. Chinese too. Israelis for sure, because yeah, they did. Well, I could. Okay, you have friends in the CIA. Trust me, like Israeli college women show great interest in you. Let's put it that way. I could tell you stories from the 90s and the 2000s about that. But in this particular case, the one from Russia with Sex, that article, they mentioned Richard Fuse, and Richard Fuse is CIA, and he had foreknowledge of 9/11.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And my other question is, I have a funny feeling, and I think a bunch of us here in the 9/11 Truth Movement do too. When you're asked a simple question like, where were you standing when you watched about the towers, and not being willing to say, what is the possible reason for that?
It's it doesn't matter, and you start listening where you worked, where you were, et cetera, et cetera. It starts to narrow things down, and it just
Why
doesn't
wouldn't
matter.
you want
It
that
doesn't
narrowed
matter.
down?
It
Why
doesn't
wouldn't
matter.
you want that narrowed down? What's at issue here?
The issue is that there are people very high level at the intelligence community that knew me and my family growing up.
Uh-huh.
If I put my real name and face and stuff out there, and I was told this by these people, they emailed me and told me this. What they do is they start mining people's social media, they start mining people's networks, they start finding out where people worked, finding out where people's addresses were. They put you together, and it's not me because I'm not important. I'm an absolute nobody, right? It's just that some people that I knew back in the day, they were involved in the cover up. People, not people that I knew, okay, but people, second level connection, people that I knew people who were involved in the 9/11 cover up. They were involved in the enhanced interrogation program. It's the biggest scandal in second biggest scandal in CIA history. And I was told in no uncertain terms that there's only so much about that I can say.
Well,
But
I
honestly,
understand.
it doesn't matter because I don't have anything to add about the day of 9/11.
Well,
You've
just
all
allow
seen the
me to
video.
finish. Just one other comment then. What you've already told us, what you've already put out, in my mind, and I would be very surprised if it wasn't also in the mind of everyone on this call, is far more so-called, quote, dangerous, unquote, in what you've just told us than where you were friggin' standing on 9/11. It feels like there's something wrong with this picture, frankly.
I don't know what to tell you. It doesn't matter. We've all seen the video. I have nothing to add to that, really.
Well, I think you're covering something up, frankly.
Well, I'm covering up a lot. Trust me, that's true. Yes. But I mean, it doesn't matter. I have nothing to add to that. That's not even the important part of my story, to be honest.
Okay, we think it's important, but go ahead.
Magnus has his hand raised. Go ahead, Magnus.
Oh, thank you. Great to see you. Yeah, great to see you. Thank you. I was just going to ask you, were you aware of that the DC Madame Deborah Palfrey, and then you have Susan Lindauer asserts that she and other intelligence colleagues were aware of the attacks in April of 2001, and Richard Carl Fuse had advised in August 2001 against traveling to New York. Park Godfrey, a professor of computer science at New York University in Toronto, Ontario, testified in the United States. Sorry.
Okay, I only got some of that. Is that woman you're talking about, the DC madam?
Oh yeah, the woman who committed suicide, who
Yes.
actually were warning about the call girls a day before, right before 9/11. She warned about these call girls had snapped up something about these hijackings.
I mean, I've heard many stories like that. I know
Okay.
that okay. What's the guy? Prince Andrews
What
is
is
the
it?
guy with the Epstein, right? One of
Yeah.
Prince Andrews' girlfriends said that Jeffrey Epstein and his friends all bought tickets for 9/11, all bought airline tickets to use as what she called a quote sick souvenir, unquote. This whole like blackmail thing is real, but I don't know anything personally about it. Even though, you know
Oh,
what, I think that project that those people were working on, I was 16 years old, so I was literally a teenage boy, had nothing to do with this. Looking back on it in hindsight, I think it probably had an element to it. But I don't know anything. Again, this is 35 years ago, a 6-year-old boy. I didn't witness anything. But
I understand,
have
but
a feeling,
Susan,
I have a feeling that there's a lot of that stuff that goes on. But that's all secondhand knowledge. But I have read a lot about it. Yes.
Okay. But Susan Lindauer had no foreknowledge in April 2001. Were you aware of that?
Susan Lindauer?
Yeah, April 2001, she claimed that she know about 9/11. And the funny
Yes.
thing over here is, let me just say something. We don't like the American movies over here in Norway after they are using. I understand the traumatized people from 9/11, but they are not using real explosions and stuff like that in movies and series. And the ironic thing is that the Johnny Bravo producer actually used a movie poster on the wall with the Inferno 97. There's a 1970s building on fire, and we're saying coming soon. And then he had to remove that poster on 9/11. So that's a conspiracy. So everybody is saying Susan Lindauer knows about 9/11 in April of 2001.
That, this is the way. Okay, so yeah, when Susan Lindauer came out with her testimony, I
Yeah.
started to kind of put this together because it was about the same time period. My guess, like, okay, so this guy, he flew around, he traveled all the time. Like, I don't know if he was himself like in the CIA, but I do think he was almost certainly working for them in some capacity. I think, believe it or not, it just is my speculation, right? My speculation is that his girlfriends were the ones who were actually the CIA officers, and he was like part of their cover. That actually would make sense to me. My guess is that one of his friends, one of his coworkers, his dad, his brother, anyone in that network probably told him the same thing that Richard Fuchs told Susan Lindauer. Don't go to Lower Manhattan. Don't go there this summer. Don't go there this fall. We're expecting a mass casualty event. I'm guessing he was told something like that. Like, hey, and then when he found out that I was moving to New York, because he didn't know anything about it, right? When he found out, I think he just was honestly worried about me, And I think he gave me this kind of a oblique warning, but there wasn't, he couldn't really tell me anything specific. So,
Wow. Well, Susan
Thank you.
was our guest speaker last September. So you can see her video on our Rumble channel.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for telling me that. I did not know. I will definitely look that up. I tried to correspond with Susan Lindauer once, but she basically just told me to buzz off for whatever reason. But her testimony is like, I mean, I completely endorse her testimony. I find her to be very credible, and like everything in her story corroborates mine, in my opinion. So I completely vouch for her. Anyone who's interested should definitely look up this guy, John Kiriakou, this former CIA guy. He has a lot of really interesting stuff about CIA and a lot of really interesting stuff about the torture program, a lot of interesting stuff about
Can you put that on the
that.
chat? I can't spell.
However, don't trust this guy. He lies about 9/11 big time. Yeah, I'll put it in the chat. I'll look him up right now and put it in the chat.
Now I'm trying to remember. There was a big Valerie Plame, right?
Yes.
Was outed, and that's when it came out that it's against the law to name CIA agents.
Yes, that was actually part of the whole thing. Again, this is just my analysis, not like a personal information, but my analysis was there was this really interesting rift between the neocons in the Bush administration and the CIA, and the outing of Valerie Plame was one of it because they were trying to, at that point, they couldn't pin 9/11 on Iraq like they originally tried, so they were moving to the weapons of mass destruction thing. And if I recall correctly, it was Valerie Plame's husband.
Right.
Traveled.
His last name was Wilson. I don't remember his first name.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, I think that's right. He wrote the article saying that Saddam Hussein did not go to Niger to get yellow cake or whatever it was. It was a big thing at the time. People made jokes about it on like Saturday Night Live and The Daily Show and stuff. Yeah, they outed her. ruining her clandestine. So she had to come back to the U.S. She can't travel internationally anymore. Scooter Libby, I don't think he served any time in prison, but he was prosecuted for that.
Right.
But then I think he got what do you call it? Pardon. I'd like to make this is a major point, okay, about the cover up and why to me it seems so unintuitive to a lot of people, and it was unintuitive to me. In 2008, when Obama gets into office, early on, I believe it was January, right as soon as he gets into office, it's a high-profile meeting between Obama and a bunch of progressive human rights groups. One, I believe, was Amnesty International. They wanted the CIA people who were involved in CIA torture to be prosecuted. They wanted Gitmo to be closed. And Obama told them basically to take a hike. It was kind of funny. There's an article in the New York Times about this. He told them, don't worry, we already stopped the torture. No one's really going to get arrested or prosecuted for it. Don't worry, you pretty little heads. Instead, help us fight the Republicans to get health care. Under Obama, they say, the CIA got what the CIA wanted. There was no daylight between the Obama administration and the CIA. That guy, John Kiriakou, was not prosecuted for whistleblowing under the Bush administration. He was prosecuted for whistleblowing under the Obama administration. The Obama administration put in John Brennan, who was a major torture advocate. I believe the people who messed with me were somewhere in that orbit of the John Brennan crowd, I'm thinking. And people don't realize that how vicious the Obama administration was towards, it was Obama who hired Cass Sunstein to quote unquote cognitively infiltrate the 9/11 truth movement. It was really under Obama that they really went hard, because if you remember at the end of the Bush administration, truth was breaking out everywhere, right? I remember at the time, I felt like it was the first time I could really talk about it openly. But under Obama, there was a big freeze. And I think that was unintuitive to me, because I thought, Bush, like his father was the big CIA guy. I thought they would be the CIA people, but apparently it was not like that.
No. I just associate Obama with the drone warfare, sanitizing war,
Yeah.
and the NDAA 2012, which rolled back the justice system to before the Magna Carta.
Yeah, and didn't that also legalize Pentagon propaganda directed against the U.S.? I think what's that one's name? Naomi Wolf, I think, wrote about this a lot.
Mm.
Have you ever heard of her?
Yeah. Yeah, the main thing about the NDA 2012 was making it legal for so completely unconstitutional. Legal for the executive office, meaning the president, to detain anyone indefinitely without evidence, without due process.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the debates over the Patriot Act and everything else. I remember way back, there was an NSA whistleblower. He talked about I could almost even remember the address, an AT&T facility in San Francisco that he said the NSA was basically just copying everyone's phone calls. This came out years ago, like 2004. People talked about it, but I don't know. They just let it go, I guess.
Well, in a way, it's implied consent. Everybody feels like, oh, yeah, that's old news. We know they're listening to us. That's like implied consent of public.
Oh, when I was on, the person who did this call, I think it was your call, right? About the privacy stuff. Like maybe a couple weeks ago, I think. One of these calls that I was on, she did a whole presentation about online privacy and surveillance and things like that. I was always really big into that. You know, I was a computer guy from way back. I learned the internet back in the 90s when virtually no one else had heard of it. I was all into like Linux and encryption and stuff like that. I got to tell you, 2000, for the 20th anniversary, I went on a podcast and my old blog got a lot bigger profile, a higher profile. But it was made clear to me over the next 2 years that I am under like personal surveillance because of the stuff I had talked about. So yeah, I'm one of these people now. I kind of gave up. I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to use Google like everyone else. There's no way I can hide from these people anyway. So
In a way, it's implied consent, but what else can we do? Yeah.
yeah, there's only so much you can do.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us tonight. Did you have any last words for the next part of our meeting? Hello?
Well, thanks everyone for listening. Please subscribe to my, social media, x.com, my Substack, etc. I'm going to be writing a lot more about this in the future. So if you're interested, please follow and I'll follow back. Thank you.
Thank you so
And
much.
any other questions anyone has, let me know.
Yeah, last chance before we go on to the agenda portion. Anyone else? Okay, great. Thank you so much. I do want to mention that our next meeting is not going to be in 2 weeks, because I'm going to be away. So our next meeting will be Sunday, August 3rd at noon. We're having Kevin Barrett. All right. So thank you so much. And I'm going to stop recording right now. I appreciate you all.